Well, Sarah, Elizabeth, Rob, Joey, Barbara, Teresa, welcome. Hi. Welcome to Show and Sharing How to Make Virtual Engagement Easy. And I thought, well, how ironic would it be if we didn't make virtual engagement easy on the session about this? So I'll kick it over to Sue in a minute for an official welcome and start. But I want to start off with something a facilitator friend, mentor of mine calls an unofficial start, Mark Collard. And I just want to invite you to contribute to the unofficial start. Just jump in. And so in the chat, would love to know your answer to this question. You can choose a work or a personal related answer, but what is something you'd like to do more of? And there's a strong intent of why I picked this question in particular. It'll help frame up our time. But just in the chat, what is something you'd like to do more of? Write and blog, get better sleep, travel, and I believe in front loading virtual engagement. I like to think about like, how can I front load value so that if your Wi-Fi cut out before the session actually started, you would have been like, wow, that was actually worth showing up. This was really useful and practical. And so the idea of the unofficial start, right, is typically we reward people for being late by waiting for them. So the unofficial start says you have human beings and they're paying their most high form of currency, their time, to be there. And so if the thing starts at 12 p.m. Eastern, why are you not doing something at 11:57 a.m. to purposefully and intentionally invite contribution rather than just consumption? And so the other thing is the unofficial start is rolling. So it's not like an official activity. It can't be, somebody can't feel excluded if they've jumped in and they're like, whoa, what's happening? So for the couple that have joined since I last held this up, the invite is to just answer this question into the chat. It could be a work-related answer or a personal-related answer, but what's something you'd like to do more of? And before I turn it over to Sue, here's lesson number one about virtual engagement. The chat is the most lovely tool and gift. Do you want to make me, Sue, a co-host? I can help with some
Yeah.
muting that needs to happen.
Yeah. Co-host. And there's someone who I need to mute, and I'm not sure who that might be, unless you don't. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Press the wrong button. All right.
So this is beautifully ironic to hold up. So here's my favorite thing. Here's my favorite feature of virtual meetings. Everyone has the ability to speak at the exact same time by typing in the chat. The problem, and so most of us have used this. Anybody who's facilitating virtual anything, like you'd be really out of date if you weren't involving people and using the chat. However, what I see often is us using the chat for sips of meaningless connection rather than leaning into a little bit of depth or meaningful connection. So here's what happens. I hold up a question, like as an unofficial start, what's something you'd like to do more of? I invite you to drop your response into the chat, and then we just move on. And what I'm communicating to you in that moment is, you know what? Every time I ask you to type in the chat, it's not really going to be used. We won't even reference it. Maybe I'll read a couple and then we'll forget about it. And so implicitly what I'm saying is your contribution isn't even all that important. So feel free to not answer the next thing that I ask you about. Whoa, right? This is like not the tone we want to set. And so round two of the unofficial start, what I'd love you to do.
Okay, let me interrupt you. Do you want to do the unofficials? Do you want to do round two before I introduce you, or now that we're at 12 o'clock, should I introduce you?
Round two is, so here's the feature of unofficial start. I love this live learning, Sue. The feature of unofficial start is that it starts a few minutes before the official start and it goes a minute or two after the official start, to not to punish people who are late, but to extend the understanding that life happens, especially virtually. You got stuff going on, you got to restart the computer, etc. So permit me round two, it's quick.
Perfect.
So what I'd love for you to do is scroll up into the chat, find somebody's name who you do not recognize, read what they've written, and if you would, unmute and just ask one follow-up question rooted in your curiosity about what they shared. And so we're just gonna do like two like little curiosity ping pong. So find something that you're naturally curious about, unmute, and by name, ask them a question. So for example, I see Sue has said travel. And so I might unmute, I'm not gonna do this now, but I might unmute and say, hey Sue, where would you love to go next? All right, so just a quick little question. When you're ready, go ahead and unmute, ask that person a question by name, and that person, the invite is to also respond. Ready, set, go for it. Whoever speaks first can sort itself out.
So this is Joey in San Antonio. Sue Nagata, since you want more daylight, where do you live?
I see Sue is on a mobile phone, and the time to unmute takes 3 seconds for a desktop and 8 seconds to find the unmute button on a mobile phone.
Can I ask another question while we're waiting?
I was just going to say, one of the best facilitators I ever saw, she called herself an appologist. She was like the technologist. She said, whenever technology gets in the way, just move it out of the way. So while Sue's figuring out the unmute button, go ahead and toss out another question.
So I'm curious, Barbara, you would like to spend more time with your family. I'm curious, like which family members you would like to see, if they're local, if not, if you can just tell me more about that.
Sure. So it's actually all family members, even the folks I live with. I work from home, but unfortunately, working from home, actually, I'm putting in even more hours because it's just easier to just come up to my office, put in 8, 10 hours a day. So trying to find that right family work balance, but it's very hard because we've got so many initiatives going on at the same time. So I'm pretty much working weekends. Today I'm actually working a 24-hour shift because we're doing a system upgrade tonight. So yeah, I would love to try to find that. And when I talk to my supervisors, I think we're all in the same shape, is how do you find that right balance?
Excellent. That's hard. That's hard. And a 24-hour shift. Okay. I'm going to be thinking about you all day.
Well,
Thank
she'll be
you.
at work all day, so she'll
Yes.
welcome the thoughts all day. All right, I'm judging based on mobile phone moving around. I'm gonna pause on Joey, your question to Sue, and label unofficial start something beautiful that I like to embrace in virtual engagement, which is imperfection. I'm so uninterested in leading perfect, clean, tight sessions that look great from a trainer's perspective, and I'm so much more interested in getting into a conversation that actually create some change. So Sue, I'll hand it over to you for an official start, and then I'll share intent and why I chose this question as our unofficial start as we dive in.
Okay. So welcome everyone. I'm Sue Landay, and this is Show and Share. And today I'm joined by Chad Littlefield, with whom I've been working for many years now. He is the president and founder of We and Me, and the developer of an amazing deck of question cards called We Connect and Engage Now.
We engage cards.
We Engage. We Engage cards. Sorry, and he's just been a delight to work with, and has some great tips for bringing virtual engagement and in-person engagement. And I'm gonna just let that be my introduction and give the floor to you.
Cool. And if you Google my name that you see on Zoom, you'll find 2 Chad Littlefields. One was involved in a high-profile murder, and then there's me. I'm still kicking. So don't be scared if you find the other. So I recognize a couple familiar names as well. Tim Arnold. I feel like we've exchanged some LinkedIn messages. Hello, welcome. Hey, so Tim just turned on his video. This is an interesting place to want to start. How many of you, just by a show of me in the chat, how many of you have navigated over between COVID and now, navigated the dynamic of some videos on, some videos off, and you're like not quite sure about the best practices of where to land on that? I see a me and another me and another me. I'll disappoint you by saying I don't have a panacea cure-all, but here is my current best thinking on how to handle this dynamic, and we're gonna just practice it now. Ready? So right now, all of you are in a different context. Even though you happen to click the same link, you've had a different day. You might be in a different time zone, a different life, career. Literally everything is different except for the Zoom link that you clicked. And so, in my opinion, ingredient number one to making virtual engagement easy is unofficial start, but ingredient number two is a context hook, something that invites everybody to be all in the same moment and set aside all life outside of this moment just for a bit, just to like have a shared context. There are lots of ways to do that. One way virtually that I like to do it is actually invite everybody to turn their video off. So go ahead and kick your video off. Ah. So videos are off, except for people joining who are still connecting to audio and can't hear me talking right now. Kayla.
The blackout.
Yeah. So there's also something, I believe, can I do this? Yes. There's also a setting on hosts on Zoom that I can click and get rid of everybody's profile images too. And when I've done this, I've turned our Zoom call into like a weird mixed blended meeting with distracting things happening of cell phones moving around and people eating apples and half the group on video and half the group off video. And I've put us all into one boat. Now we're in a podcast and I'm the host and we've got, looks like Zoom has 24 guests on our podcast. And so as a way of inviting you to really arrive to our session, I want to invite you to make a choice. I respect that you have lots of context going on in your life. And if you got 3 kids sitting on your lap asking for spaghetti, video off might be the best option. And because this session is very much designed for contribution, we're going to be practicing some ideas around how to make virtual engagement easy rather than me giving you a PowerPoint telling you about them. We're just going to do them. And so throughout, there will be times where it really makes sense to have our videos on. And so take the next 30 seconds to put on a shirt if you don't already have one, or get yourself video ready. And if you're in a position where it's not ultimately distracting for people that you could turn your video on, my invite is on the count of 3 for everybody to turn their video on and just give a little wave, look at gallery view and give a little wave to somebody else. Ready, set? 3, 2, 1. Hello. And this is one way, even though you're all on a 2-dimensional screen, this is one way that we just became a little bit more 3-dimensional, right? Now you're not a black box with a name, you're a human being with pictures hung up in the background and all sorts of curiosity. And Joey's actually in a group of 3 to 4 people, so it's not just Joey, it's a whole crew. Hold up a number 1 if you're in speaker view and I'm really big on your screen, and hold up a number 2 if you're in gallery view and you can see everybody. Ah, so if you're in gallery view, you can see a bunch of 2s and a bunch of 1s, which means that we're still actually not in the same context because everybody's in a different meeting. For some people, I'm really big, and for some people, I'm really tiny, and they're really distracted by everybody else's moving. And so I think the video on gallery view Brady Brunch, I've learned, is not connecting just because people are on video. In fact, if anything, it might be distracting. And so my question is, how do we make it connecting? And for me, that is inviting people onto video for some purpose. So I had a pretty cheap purpose of give a wave. But now what I'd love you to do is a training exercise or illustration that I'm sure some of you have done or seen, but go ahead and cross your arms. And this would be useful to get into gallery view. So for a minute, switch into gallery view. Everybody cross your arms and look down, and whatever arm is on top, flip the arm so the other arm is on top. And just kind of get a little close to the camera and make the face of how does that feel? Yeah, it's like some hemming, hawing for about maybe 2% of you who are like ambidextrous arm crossers. You're like, this is great. I could do it either way. It's all good. But for most people, like, it feels a little uncomfortable. And so, as a context hook, right now in this moment, all you're thinking about is which way the arm's crossing, and that's happening. And perhaps you're not thinking about the meeting you had before this, what's going on outside. Just for that moment, you were in this context hook. So I'm going to start drawing you out because you don't know this, but we're in the middle of the workshop already. because I'm going to kind of walk you through experientially these 5 ingredients for engagement. And I've already done number 1, which I would call, and my friend and colleague Mark Collard would call, the unofficial start. And I started to dip into this idea of a context hook. Switching to all caps now. And half of you are going to have tech questions of how this is happening, and this is not a tech tutorial. So there's a YouTube link that walks through the whole tech setup of how I'm screen sharing and writing on an iPad and all of that. And it's going to be way better answered in that video than me taking up everybody's time here. So if you're curious about that, open that as a tab and leave it for later. So we did a couple things. We all turned off our video. So I showed you a couple examples of context hook, all video off, crossing your arms. The lowest prep way is to come up with the one single punchy intent statement that allows you all to say, well, shoot, I was kind of just going to passively tune into this show and share. I come to them every couple weeks or every couple times Sue has one. And the context hook, the intent statement might make you say, well, shoot, I think I'm getting like a $20,000 workshop for free right now. Maybe I'll tune in and actually really engage and pay attention. And so my intent statement for you for this session is, my intent is in the next 45 minutes in Zoomtown that we have together, is that I share a perspective or share something that very, very literally edits your future starting this week and next week. And what I mean by that is this, right? So I started off an unofficial start with this question: what is something you'd like to do more of? And the reason I did is, about a year ago, I had a mentor just casually ask me this question: what's something you'd like to do more of? And just a little like connection before content, before we actually got into what we were going to talk about that day. And my answer was scuba diving. Grew up in Massachusetts, diving for lobster, pulling lobster out from underneath rocks. Didn't think anything of it, right? Little chit chat beforehand. 8 months later, I was giving a keynote down in Florida to 150 directors of learning and development and people at organizations all around the country. And I flew down a day early to go scuba diving for the first time in 5 years. I got young kids. I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. No scuba diving has been happening in the last 5 years. But I flew down earlier and I didn't make the connection. But when I popped out of the water, I said, holy smokes, Mark Levy, who asked me this question, what is something you want to do more of? If he didn't ask me that, there is a 0% chance that I would have had it in my mind, that I would have actually gone scuba diving. And herein lies the magic for me. The first book that I co-wrote with my late co-author, Will Wise, called Ask Powerful Questions. The subtitle is Create Conversations That Matter. Will had dyslexia and misspoke that subtitle one time and said, Conversations That Create Matter. That's what it is. My intent is that this conversation, what we're doing right now in the show and share, is we create an experience and a conversation that actually creates matter, that edits the future, that changes something you say or do to a group, and it fundamentally impacts their experience in a really useful or profound way. Woo! Okay. This was a lot thrown at you. I want to pause before we switch gears into some connection with each other, connection before content with each other. I want to pause and just create a reaction commercial break for anybody that wants to kind of add. So I just threw out some popcorn to you. Anybody want to add some butter to the popcorn and react, respond, or ask anything? And so just a 2-minute reaction commercial break. And this is me. We're in Zoom. So virtually we live in the vacuum of mute when we're training, teaching, leading, facilitating. And so for me, a reaction commercial break is a really lovely gift, and actually an essential element of virtual engagement is be able to create the space where you say full open time for contribution. So I'm open to you having no reaction, but I want to honor the fact that you might have a reaction that could be really useful to you and or other people in the group. So I'm going to put myself on mute. And I'd love to take half of this timer for you to think about, is there anything you want to just react to, say, share, or ask at this point before I move to ingredient number 3? And if you've got something, the virtual version of raising your hand isn't the hand raise tool. It's just coming off mute and saying something. So if you got something, feel free to come off mute. And
I see a few
go for it.
folks unmuted. Go ahead.
Yep.
Lori, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna ask Chad if that timer on the screen is, will I learn about how to do that on that link that you shared as well?
You
I
will.
love that. Awesome.
Yeah. The short answer is the camera that's selected on Zoom right now is Ecamm Live, which is like a live streaming tool. And so I've set up all these scenes. So I press this button on a Stream Deck and it can draw on my iPad, and I press this button and there's an activity with some future cards, and this is a 1-minute timer and this is a 2-minute timer. And if I really want to make a point, this is going to make me big and zoom in so I can really say something important. So
Awesome.
it took
Really
like, there's a
nice.
learning curve, and the reason I don't want to focus on that is that the thing that makes the biggest impact for people is the structure and the facilitation and how you're inviting their contribution. It's not the show that you're putting on with all the buttons. Like, that's cool, that's flair. But if you're using all of that, but not really engaging and inviting people's contribution in a meaningful way, then all this stuff doesn't matter. Right?
So Chad, one of the things that that you talked about in your book,
Yeah.
which is partly why we're here,
Oh
is
yeah.
that just which is using physical physical devices, like you use the card and you put it right in front of the camera. And I was just I think I mentioned this to you earlier, but I find that a lot of folks will ask me, like at ATD, you have these great thumb balls or whatever. There they are. But what can I do for my online meetings? And the fact that you use physical items, whether, within the context of a virtual meeting, I think is just really kind of interesting and compelling. And maybe you'll get to this, but you also have asked people to make use of something at home.
Yep.
Like, how are you feeling, or what color are you feeling that reflects that? And so maybe I, look around my desk and I pull something yellow and orange, like, I'm feeling sunny, even though it's gray out. But like the idea of bringing objects into the conversation, I think
Yep.
is just a really interesting one.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely segue into connection before content, where we're going. I want to create a little bit more space for a couple other reactions, and then we're going to teleport there. Anybody else want to say? Yeah, Nora.
Yeah, chat, what's your pros and cons of using Chat Blast? Do you know that technique, Chat Blast?
Is that maybe Chat Waterfall?
Sometimes it's called Chat Bomb, but I don't like that word. So Chat Blast, where everybody types in, but you tell them not to hit enter yet. So everyone types, it gets more people to be typing. And then you say go, and then it populates, and then you get to go back up and cherry pick which ones you want to hit. So do you have a pro and con on that? Do you use that?
I teach that as Chat Waterfall, Chat Blast works, Chat Bomb, however you want to label it. I like labeling things that are also maybe purpose or context specific. So if I'm working with a group of leaders and their bosses in the room, I might call that technique. This is the everybody speaks honestly without copying the first person who hits enter technique. Right? So yes, but the point is, like, it's a really remarkable, effective way to avoid groupthink and get a bunch of data out there really quickly. One even more intentional way that I have learned to do it is Chat Blast, Chat Waterfall has this even connotation around like quickness. And this is how I think we underutilize the chat with like one phrase responses. And so I've learned to say, we're not going to do this right now. Actually, let's do this right now. I'm going to put up a 1-minute timer, maybe a 2-minute timer. And what I'd love for you to do is instead of Chat Blast, Chat Waterfall, I'd love to do some what I call collaborative journaling. If you're journaling, how weird would it be to journal and write a single word or phrase? You'd be the worst journaler on the history of the planet. Right? A journal, the idea is to actually just free write out, get some thoughts out of your brain, turn on that part of your brain that's thinking about that. And so I'm going to hold up a question, and this will be an example of our connection before content in an asynchronous way where you don't have the ability to do breakouts, or for whatever reason, you're choosing not to do breakouts. So one of my favorite things that the cards I created is you can add context to the end of every question to make it purposeful. For me, one of my kind of author heroes and mentors, Peter Block, who's now 86, he wrote Flawless Consulting and Community, The Structure of Belonging. So I was chatting with Peter the other day, and it just always anchors back, like the idea of connection before content. Like, this is not an icebreaker. This is not small talk before you actually get into the meeting. Connection before content, which, real quick, bloop, is ingredient number 3. Must connect people to each other, but also connect to the purpose of why you are actually there. If it does not connect to the purpose of why you are actually there, then it might be a thing, but I will not put it in the category of connection before content. And then the third ingredient, or the last piece of connection before content, is that it's got to be true. Inviting some level of authenticity or vulnerability cannot and should not force it, but at least creates the option or choice to share something that's real for you. And so I'm going to hold up this question and tailor it a little bit to fit the purpose. So the question is, how would you like to be remembered? But I'm going to add the context. How would you like to be remembered as a trainer, facilitator, educator, however you identify? So how would you like to be remembered as a facilitator or trainer? And if you would, take a full minute to free write, 2 minutes, to free write your response to that in the chat, but do not hit enter. So Teresa, thank you for a perfect example of a chat blast, fun and effective. So journaling, this might be 2 to 3 sentences. How would you like to be remembered as a facilitator? Gotcha, Teresa. I think, yeah. When the timer hits 0, we'll all hit enter at the exact same time. Best thing about facilitator time is you can just decide to change it, even if there's a timer up. So let's call it done. Everybody on the count of 3, finish that last word, and 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Whoa. Do you immediately feel the difference between chat? It's like now I actually have a conversation with somebody. So here's the beautiful thing. We all just spoke at the same time. And it would be a really crap conversation if we didn't all listen too. And so what I'd love you to do is I'm going to put up another 1-minute timer and go through and just read through a bunch of people's responses with this listening for. Read through with something that really struck you. So kind of have a looking for something that really resonated or struck you. And I use struck in the sense of like lightning, like, ooh, that sticks out to me. Cool. So take a minute, read through people's responses. And after that minute, I'm going to ask you to verbally come off mute and popcorn out a handful of things that struck you. And off mute, would you just popcorn, and popcorn's quick, just popcorn a couple things that really struck you from what you just read.
I'm with Sarah, fun and effective. It's got to be both, but there's no harm in having fun in training.
Love it. What else?
Really liked Rob's response about just making a difference in someone's life. What we're doing every day, and I'm aging myself, is like we're just time to make the donuts, but hopefully we're impacting someone's life really positively, and those light bulb moments for be a catalyst for change in their lives.
That one struck out to me too, Charity. And as I was scrolling up, I also saw Sam's that said, just be remembered, right? Like people see so much. And so that was like the other piece that, is the juxtaposition of that. I liked both of those among all these others, but.
Yeah. Okay, so we could continue, but let me pause there. So you're all quite intelligent people, so you already see what's happening here a little bit, right? But Rob's name was said, Sarah's name was said, Charity's name was said. I said Nora's name. Sue spoke. So 4 people spoke. 3 other people's had their light switch turned on because their name was spoke out. They felt perhaps, I can't speak for Rob and Sarah, but I would suggest, I would go out on a limb to say, I bet they feel a little bit more seen and heard than they did 60 seconds ago because they were actually just noticed, right? Otherwise, you're just an anonymous pixelated Zoom box that shows up for an hour and disappears and nobody knows you were there or not. It's like literally the definition of just being entirely ignored or forgotten. And I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but not that dramatic. Like how many virtual trainings has somebody come on and if a human being wasn't there, you wouldn't have noticed and neither would anybody have else, right? Like there's a confrontation for you. When you're talking about virtual engagement, it's like how many people, what percentages of our audience could just literally be vacuumed out of there with no consequence? That's a scary, that's a scary, confronting, but I think very important question. Because for me, engagement is not just like tricks, games, etc. That is an element. I love having fun and integrating participation and etc. But the meaning element has to be there, or else, in my opinion, you risk hardening people and making them more resistant to go to the next training if there isn't tied to purpose, tied to meaning, tied to benefit for them. Even if you're leading some like really, really, really dry quality service, mandatory training that everybody's forced to be there, whatever else, embedding the meaning is probably more important than any trick that I could possibly teach you. Okay. So there's one kind of async way to do connection before content, but do you realize that I gave you a minute and a half to type, collaboratively journal. I gave you a minute to read through people's responses. If we did a go around of intros, this would have taken 3 hours and you would have only been thinking about yourself the whole time because you would have been paying attention to, oh, what am I going to say when it's my turn? And so this is, for me, I like asking the question with virtual meetings. I don't like to ask it like, how can we make this as engaging as in person? I like to ask the question, what can we do virtually that you actually cannot do in person? And what we just did is an example of that. It's really hard to do what we just did in person, but I would argue that it's useful, and holy smokes, can it be used and applied to teach content? So let me keep things rolling along here.
And let me just check in.
Yeah.
I know we sort of put like a half hour time on this, but I think that we're all kind of engaged and keeping going. Want to just, everybody okay to keep pushing, or is there anyone who needs to leave who has a question before they do? Just want to kind of check in with the group.
So the
All
beautiful
good?
thing
Thumbs
about
up?
the
Keep going.
let me create both options here, Sue.
Okay.
So the beautiful thing about the unconference that I think Nora is going to be going to in Boulder, the unconference or the facilitators unconference that Tom Leahy puts on in Colorado, which is a very fun experiential event. No agenda, unconference. So they use open space technology. If you're familiar to facilitate it, one of the laws of open space is the law of 2 feet. And so if at some point you got what you needed and you'd rather go implement it rather than sit here and hang out with me, please feel free and welcome to do that. Sue, I definitely really thought we had 60 minutes. So here we are in the middle.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's 100% my lackadaisicalness in turning up. So quick zoom out context review. So three ingredients here. I didn't really explain how I'm using these. So the 5 ingredients for me, this was a solution to my own problem, which was like, I am very stressed and I'm paying a high anxiety tax before I fly to X client to deliver X workshop. I'm spending a lot of time prepping and even more time stressing about that prepping. And so I was like, I need to figure out a better method of cutting that stress in half, and also preparing better. And so over the course of the last 12 years, I've winnowed down and settled on these 5 ingredients for engagement, as I call them. And I think of them as like booster shots. You don't need necessarily to inject all 5 into a session, but I can guarantee you if you inject even one of them into a session, in that particular moment, you'll see engagement go up. And so just to be really like clear and simple, when I design a session, even as I'm actually live designing and facilitating this session, I literally write on a blank piece of paper or document 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't care if it's a 1 hour or I don't care if the curriculum's baked, 1 hour all day. I literally write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I make a couple notes about the unofficial start, a couple notes about what I'm going to do for the context hook, the bit for the connection before content, what I'm going to lead there. And then ingredient number 4, for most people, if you map these to a timeline, this is 80 to 90% of your session in time. It's the stuff you're trying to actually get across to people. It's your content. It's whatever's on your slides, if you've got slides. It's whatever the mandated thing that you got to teach. It's whatever you want people to be practicing and embodying. It's your content. In parentheses, boop, content designed ideally for contribution, not just consumption. And you all know this because you showed up to a thing like this.
Mhm.
But when you design your sessions purely for consumption, even what I'm doing right now, this lecturette mode of me, iPad, teacher drawing, I am competing with TikTok, Hulu, your inbox, all the other priorities you have, because you're just consuming and taking in what I'm saying. And that's a really lousy place to compete. But when I hold up this question, I stop competing in the land of consumption and I start competing in the land of contribution, and there's much more space. It's way easier to rise to the top and be remembered when you're competing in the land of contribution. So here's an example. Right now, I'm in the land of consumption, teaching you 1, 2, 3, 4. I haven't gotten to 5 yet. One way that I can invite your contribution and personalize the session right now is in the chat, just from numbers 1 through 4. Can you just type the number you feel like you're best at from your current understanding of how I explain them in kind of this fast format? Can you just type the number that you feel like you nail? Like if you had a superpower of these 4 ingredients, you're crushing number blank. And can you just type that number into the chat? I want to get a little litmus test of where skill set in the room is. Cool. So if we were in person, and we could do this virtually, and if we had more time, if I were in person, I'd say, great, hold up that number on your hand and go pair up with somebody who doesn't have your number and teach each other something. Right? Super lovely, simple methodology to create this collaborative learning that's very much tied to the content that I'm actually teaching you right now. Cool? Ooh. So let's do that in
Lots
a
of threes. I feel
Yeah.
like the crux of it, the number 4, the content, we had a few people, Jennifer, Joey, not scrolling up, Tim, actually, I guess a few, Heather, Vanessa. Yeah, I'm eager to, I feel like those connections before you have to, in connection to content, before you have to dive deep in, for me is easier. So I'm eager. Move on.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's outside the scope of this. So this is maybe something you want to bookmark. I put together, so for ingredient number 4, content design for contribution, put together a little blog on my site with a whole laundry list, 2 videos and a whole laundry list of really practical ways that you can turn content. And one of the ways that I've kind of pinned that is like, how do you make a PowerPoint presentation really interactive? So can we actually do this? Does somebody have, is somebody able to pull up a piece of content that they are training sometime, or like teaching, sharing with people sometime in the next week or so? And can you actually share some of this content, and let's actually just live design your content for contribution right now? It's like the HGTV renovate your house, like renovate your content, turn your content into contribution. Quick, just visual hand raise if somebody's, I see like people scouring for a deck right now. Just a hand raise if you want to volunteer, physical hand raise if you want to volunteer to be the person that screen shares something that we could workshop.
I'm your last resort. I would, but I want to give the folks on who are here first dibs.
Yeah, my especially facilitating virtually, my comfort with silence is, and like the pause is doubled virtually compared to in person. Just trusting that, like literally finding the unmute button, making that decision, etc. So one way too, this is a lovely way I would say to design content for contribution, is instead of what I just did, which I would say is poor form. Anybody want to volunteer? And then like no hands raised. So much better method. Instead of creating no silence at all and forcing people into the urgency of that choice, create productive silence for people to make a conscious choice. So here we go. 30 seconds. Consider, is there any piece of your content that you would love to workshop right now? And at the end of this timer, I'm going to ask, does anybody want to volunteer to just kind of come off mute and have a one-to-one hot seat consult with me? I see a Wendy in the chat. I don't know if that was a volunteer or not.
Yeah, if nobody else, if you just want to like look at it, I have to explain a very small Medicaid program to a bunch of wonks. So that's what I'm doing today.
Please define wonk as I Google the term.
Folks that love policy and dig in, and bureaucrats who love policy.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm appreciating. This is a new vocab word for me. Person who takes an enthusiastic or excessive interest in the specialized details of a particular subject or field, especially political policy. Lovely. Okay. So do you have slides for this, Wendy?
I do.
And what's the average word count on your slides?
About 45,000. Yeah, a lot.
Your fellow trainer friends all just dropped their jaw. I don't know if you're in gallery view, but everyone went.
Yeah. There's a lot of wordiness. Yeah.
So the good news is wonks can read. And so the simplest example that I can offer for 2 paths to present a 45,000 word slide. I like the hyperbole that we're speaking in right now. So 2 paths. Path number 1. Hey, everybody, I'm going to explain this Medicaid policy. It's really detailed. I want you to really tune in and pay attention. It's going to take me about 5 minutes to unpack. You ready? And then fast forward 5 minutes of lecturette explaining each policy. So that's way number 1. Way number 2, and again, I'm making some assumptions here, Wendy, because I don't know all of your context, but you've given me a good bit from the term wonk. And so I know my audience a little bit here. And so I'm going to put up that 45,000 word slide and say, hey, y'all, what would be way more interesting than me presenting this to you? You've all got an expertise and an interest in policy. I'm going to set a timer and see if you can, in 2 minutes, digest this slide and answer these 2 questions at the end of the 2 minutes. You ready? What is the most important piece of information on the slide, and what is the least important piece of information on the slide? 3, 2, 1, go.
awesome. Yeah.
You will be doing no effort during that time, Wendy. They will be doing all the work. You will lean in and give the wonks a hug with that. And then at the end of that 2 minutes, your facilitation looks like what I just did earlier, which is great. I bet everybody's got a different perspective. I want to just popcorn out a handful of responses. Most important piece of information, go. Cool, pause. Okay, I think, anybody hear a theme in what was just shared? You get that participation. And you say, okay, cool. Least important information. And I'm actually going to go in edit mode on the PowerPoint. We're just going to go ahead and delete that section for the next training. I'm not actually do that. You got the idea, right? You really just engage them in the content. You can really change prompts, but like if you need to put that in your toolbox in some sort of category, it's like search and find or search and participate. Give it a label. But the idea is share the content, let them digest it. Popcorn it out. If you've got the time, I like even more getting people into groups of 3 to share their responses and talk with each other, so the wonks can be wonks with wonks, which is
It's your new favorite
much more.
word.
Me too. Right, which is if you did an fMRI scan of the wonks in that context, their brains would be lit up in groups of 3, unpacking policy, nerding out on what they're interested in and what they love. And their brains, I forget who it was, one of, oh my goodness, why can I not remember? Clifton Gallup Strengths people. Who's the author of, like, the son of StrengthsFinder? Why can I not think of this? Tom? Whatever. Person, famous author, giving a keynote once, and he put up a slide with 9 fMRI scans, and he made us all stand up to consume it. He said, everybody stand up. I want to show you the slide. And it was 9 fMRI scans organized from most activity, most brain activity, blood flow, oxygenation, to least activity, and he went down the list. And so like at the top was, things like exercise, really physical motion engagement, etc. And then number 8 was sleeping, and number 9 was attending a university lecture. So
Yeah.
I'm sharing this more playfully because I tried to find the actual like peer-reviewed study after this, and I couldn't actually find it. So I don't know. I can't say for certain that that was true, but you get the idea, right? And so this is why I like to compete in the land of contribution. This is why I've been asking you to participate in the chat. This is why I've done collaborative journaling. This is why we're coming off mute. This is why Wendy and I are in a little hot seat right now, right? This looks like virtual engagement. And you all know this because you practice this and you turned up to a thing like this, but hopefully you're just taking away some really lovely practical examples of this. My compulsion, anybody else that maybe wanted to volunteer or get their content renovated in the way that Wendy just had that example for her stuff? We want to play with one other? Cool. And this is my timer of participation. Awesome. All right. So everybody turn off your videos. Turn off your videos. When we spend too long on a Zoom session, we become computer people and we forget that we have bodies sometimes. And so what I want you to do now that everybody's video is off and I'm in gallery view, I can confirm that I cannot see any of you. What I would love for you to do is just actually pay attention to your body. And what is something that like needs stretched? Is it your back that's a little achy? Do you need to stretch out your wrists because you've been on a keyboard or a mouse? Do you need to stand up and do something? And just take 10 to 30 seconds to just get like a quick moment of physicality that is going to serve you best. Quick 10 seconds, get a little stretch, come back.
Chad,
And
why suggest that you do this without cameras on versus with?
I think depending on the context, you could do cameras on. Partially for me is like, I bet in most of your virtual trainings, you don't have everybody turn off your videos. And so partially it's just like for the novelty of like, we're doing a thing right now.
Gotcha.
So
Plus,
that's
some
one reason.
people- Some people just wear tops and they got their PJs on the bottom.
There's that too.
Yeah, so the other thing, I know I got long arms and broad shoulders, and so I know half my shirts, if I want to do this stretch, you're gonna see like way more of my midsection than you'd prefer to see on a Zoom call. And so partially,
Gotcha.
I actually do think the physicality, like really giving full autonomy and choice for somebody to actually do a stretch that would serve them rather than do something that feels appropriate on Zoom in a work context.
Fair enough. Because I wanted to also mention Trainers Warehouse has a software program, an online subscription called exchange.trainerswarehouse.com, which has a whole bunch of conversation starters that you could use for your context before connection before content, and just kind of creating connections for people. And in that, there's also some just like energizers and body stretches that you could pull up and get like a random stretch to do. So, there are, I suppose, a variety of ways to do that, but it's an interesting rationale for doing it with cameras off. Hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Please put a link to that, Sue. You showed me it beforehand. It looked really lovely. And please put a link to that so everybody can access that. Okay. If it would serve you, go ahead and turn your video on. This is not my Zoom room, but I recently hosted my own Connectors Summit event. So we had 500 trainers, educators. Sue and I were jamming on this. Maybe Trainers Warehouse and I ended up collaborating on a future summit together. But it was awesome. It was like a day and a half of structured virtual engagement, demonstration, lovely connection, hopping out, etc. And I don't remember why I brought that up, but it was really purposeful and it was going to be awesome. But it wasn't.
The exchange, turning back on.
We're just going to have to let that one. I met my wife living on an Anishinaabe Indian reservation, and we were there, like living, just listening to the elders, medicine men, learning, like not doing, changing, fixing anything. And these two medicine men were sitting, giving a 3-hour lecture or talk, but I was tuned in, like they had a presence about them. And he got like 2.5 hours in, like right to the climax of the whole point. He was going to bring it all together. And he literally paused and said, I don't remember what I was going to say, which means it wasn't meant for you at this time. And moved on. I was like, and my biggest thank you to him is now when I forget something and I'm facilitating, I can just share that story and maybe get a cop out.
There you go.
It wasn't meant for you at this time. It'll come back to me if it's important enough. So my leaning is, for those of you counting, we haven't made it to 5, so let's skip to the end. Any guesses? This is me designing content for contribution. Any guesses as to what you would put as your 5th or last ingredient for engagement? Thinking about your own sessions. By the way, these 5 map to a timeline, right? So if I drew a timeline like this, the beginning and the end of your session, ingredient number 1 is going to be here, and then number 2, and then connection before content, and then content's taking up most of the space, and then the last thing in the chat. Debriefing, application, closing, conclusion, takeaways. Yes is my answer to you. I label it closing. And the reason why I chose that word is many years ago at a networking event, I met a woman who, all white hair, half my height and triple my age. She was about 90 years old. Her name was Connie. And I held up my hand to introduce myself. And she said, hi, I'm Connie. I'm a professional storyteller. I'm like, ooh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. And so she told me more. And then I asked, I'm curious, for you, what's kind of a number 1 tip for telling really phenomenal stories? And she said, I got it. Before I even finished the question, she's like, I got it. All you got to do is know the first sentence you're going to say and the last sentence that you're going to say, and then fill in the middle with the truth. And so my experiential facilitation design for contribution lens for that is know the first thing you're going to do unofficial start to set the tone for contribution so that when people walk in, they don't think, this is another thing where someone's just going to run through a deck for an hour and then I get to go back to my life. If they come in and they're invited to engage in some purposeful way, you end up in the category of, okay, I actually got to like minimize things and pay attention or else this is going to be awkward, right? And so you set that tone in the beginning. That's really important. In the closing, you're shaping how someone's going to enter their next thing, how they're going to enter their real life and apply or not apply it, the state that they're going to enter their next meeting, etc. And so I'll lead, turn it over to Sue for any closing words or invites or call to actions. And then I'll wrap up with a closing, but I'm wondering if 2 to 3 minutes, if we can, because you all just shared debriefing, takeaways, closing. I wonder if just off mute, we can popcorn out 3 examples of your favorite closings. So I know parents aren't supposed to have favorite kids, but most facilitators and trainers that I know have favorite activities that they tend to come back to. And so I'm curious if I can get 3 hands raised to popcorn out. Just share 3 ways that you like to close sessions that you found to be really impactful or useful for folks. I see a Sam. You get to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Right.
hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to get number 2 and 3, but number 2 and 3, just get ready to be number 2 and 3. Go ahead, Sam.
Apologies. Most of the trainings that I lead are multiple days, and so the evening conclusion that I found to be most effective is the Rosebud Thorn, which is their most impactful moment of the day, the thing that they're looking forward to most the next time that we gather together, and then the thing that they're still needing time to think about, or the thing that's pressing them, that they need to consider more, that they'll bring back the next day for us to talk about.
And at dinner tonight, Sam, Otto, and Ellie, ages 5 and 2, will be sharing a rosebud thorn at dinner time. This has become a tradition for us. It's like the pains of living with a facilitator. Nora.
I like to use the Post-its. I think Sue sells them. She could put the link in there. They're start, change, continue, stop. So they're Post-its that have those headers on them. And I give everyone a set of those at the beginning of the day so they can be making their notes on those as they go through the day. Sometimes it's their exit ticket that I collect one of those things at the end of, as they leave the room, they have to turn in one of those to me so I get some feedback immediately. But they're little Post-its, they're very convenient. Let's see, yeah, she just put the link in there to them. They're colorful, they're fun. It's a gimmick. I like them.
Love it. And Sue aptly dropped the link. So now you got it. Do we have one more, or am I going to be the third? Charity.
One class that we've rolled out in my organization recently it's a big change. So of course, change management, but honestly, we've been ending the class and we're small, so no copyright infringement. We've been ending the class with the Dwight Schrute video from The Office about how experience is the best teacher. So it's just that encouragement, like you've now got to go do it. But it's kind of a fun way for them to be like, oh yeah, smoking's going to save lives today. So it's just funny and encouragement to go do these different things.
Love it. Okay. There's so much here.
Which one from The Office? What did you say? Charity, which one from The Office?
It's there's a clip of Dwight Schrute where nobody listened to his PowerPoint presentation on fire safety. So he starts a fire. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sue, anything that you want to close? So for me, one of the important features of closings, and I made this mistake a whole bunch where I think I'd close and then be like, oh shoot, there's 2 logistics that I need to mention. And then I close with logistics in a rush, which is like such an unpleasant way to leave people. And so in my opinion, any logistics, calls to actions, etc., should be the second to last thing that you close with. So Sue,
I
any
probably
last
should
words?
have logistics to close with and advertise the next show and shares coming up. But generally, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here, for participating, and to you. So, and actually, we have a request from Rob saying, Chad, can you come back and demonstrate this technique with an actual topic so we can kind of see it in action? So maybe that's something that we can think about down the road. But
yes, we can explore.
Thank you. Leave it to you.
So So my one invitation or call to action, I don't do too much for free anymore in my practice, but I really like Sue, and I believe that her heart and her business with Trainers Warehouse is really in the right place, and so it's a treat to come on and share this. So Rob, to that answer, maybe, but probably not for $0. But my invite is two free options. So one, all the like cards and whatnot that I share, I make available, like printable versions and whatnot, available for free. And so, I hope it's okay as an exchange for coming and sharing. I send out 2 videos a month. So over COVID, I started just teaching and answering facilitator, trainer, connector questions through YouTube. And so the format of my videos are, the title of the most videos is a question that somebody has actually asked me. And then the video is my most practical, useful response. And so I send out those for free. Sue just shared a link to my connection toolkit, the physical thing you can get. But the link to my site and that newsletter, that would be a way for us to stay in touch. And Rob, there actually are quite a bit of recorded examples too that I share through there. So there's a lot of stuff that you can find on there. It'd be a treat to connect. And then
Yeah, I also put the card
Yeah.
decks that you were holding up.
yes,
That, as we
this.
saw modeled, are great both online and in person.
Yeah,
And
then,
Chad has
the
all
irony.
kinds of tips on how to use those, in person and within the book, to use all of these tools.
Yeah, isn't that funny? You invited me to come talk about the book, and never talked about the book. This is how terrible at selling things I am. So the book that I wrote that Sue invited me to talk about is how to make virtual engagement easy. I'm really good at buying books, but I'm bad at reading them. And so I wrote a book that is not meant to be read all the way through. And so the table of contents is a list of all the questions that people have asked me about facilitating virtually, remotely, etc. And then the chapters are my response. And I'm also just, not great at reading in general. And so the structure is like, so this question is how to, whatever that is, I can't read it backwards.
How can
that's the
active
question.
participation in meetings be encouraged?
Thank you, co-facilitator.
5
And,
ingredients for success.
and every chapter has a video kind of summary showing that chapter, as opposed to just sharing that chapter in the book. And so really lovely resource to be able to like reference, pick up, etc. And that's found, is that on Trainers Warehouse?
It's not, we
Okay.
haven't been selling books too well, so
Yeah.
you'll find it on Chad's website.
All right. So it's there or on Amazon. And here's my closing, and that only takes 10 seconds. My invite is, do what I'm about to do, except for you. Ready? So take something that you picked up that you really enjoyed and appreciated seeing, learning in our time together today. And however you remind yourself, for me, it's often Siri. When we get off this call, just say, think about the next training that you have where you might actually be able to apply some of this. So if it's on February 28th, I'm going to say, hey Siri, remind me on February 28th to come up, or no, remind me on February 27th to come up with an unofficial start for my session tomorrow that really ties into the purpose of why everybody's here. Boop. I love closing the distance between learning and application, and that takes a learning from here and puts it right into the place that you're more realistic to actually apply it. So that's my closing exercise for you. Get out of
Love
here. Thank you.
Chad, thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for being with us. And
Feel free to unmute
have
and
a
say
great
goodbye
rest
in
of,
whatever language.
have a great rest
Sorry,
of your
Sue.
day.
Thanks, Chad. It was fascinating.
Adios, gracias.
Adios.